Hey everyone, good day to all of you. Hope you're all doing well. I wanted to do a review today to talk about the LMT Axle Euro trigger. What makes this a particularly interesting trigger is the fact that you can put the safety on regardless of whether this is cocked or uncocked. So of course, traditional AR trigger, you can only put it on safe when the rifle is cocked compared to this, you can see. So of course, trigger is cocked, or the hammer's cocked right now. Dropping that, you can hear it went forward, and then of course, goes back on safe, totally fine. Of course, you can see I recock it and everything is still working totally fine. Now personally, if I can get a trigger that has that added safety feature, I always do prefer it. It's just a little bit safer overall, and it's not the biggest thing in the world, but especially if you're doing certain malfunction clearance drills, it can help to just be a little less iffy if you're having to mortar the charging handle, for instance, stuff like that. Not totally necessary, but like I said, something I do prefer. If you don't care about that either way, LMT also makes the just regular axle trigger, which otherwise is identical, just doesn't have that additional feature. As for the rest of this trigger's performance, I do really like this. I think this is one of the best triggers I've tried thus far. 4.5 total pull weight. This is a two-stage trigger, but the second stage here is very, very crisp. So you can see, taking up, there's the wall to the first stage right there, and then it's just a very, very crisp break. You can see almost no travel on the second stage before it just drops the hammer. Excellent. Compared to something like, so I tested this against a Geissele 2-stage. As well as to a Schmeisser 2-stage trigger, which before this was by far my favorite trigger, and I'm still going to be using it for some reasons I'll discuss in a bit, but this by far has the cleanest break. It feels like the first stage on this is actually the lightest of all the three triggers that I've tried, and the second stage is just, you barely tap it from there and it goes. So excellent break. I think that just for comparison, I believe that the Geissele 2-stage trigger that I was comparing this one to, I think that's the one that they advertise, or that Geissele advertises as being kind of it breaks like a carrot rather than like glass. So if that makes sense to you, then this one definitely does break more like glass. It's just a super crisp break, which I really do prefer. I wanted to talk about how this installs. If you're familiar with how to install a Geissele trigger, or if you're familiar with how to install just a mil-spec AR trigger, exactly the same. Uses the exact same pins. There's really, truly nothing different with it. When you receive this, assuming that it comes in the original packaging, and also assuming that LMT doesn't change it in the future, it comes in almost this Altoid tin looking sort of thing you can see here, which is kind of just amusing. It is stamped with LMT's logo though. The trigger itself does come, you can see, sort of assembled, so you don't need to put in the disconnector, for instance. It's just the trigger unit, if you want to call it that, the hammer, and then you just pop your pins in and you're good to go. Other than that, you can see, of course, the trigger shoe itself is a totally normal, just, from a distance, it just looks like your normal mil-spec trigger. It's the exact same type of curvature, same sort of profile. The shoe itself is actually a little bit wider, which I actually do really prefer. It's not like those narrow, some of those triggers are kind of like that, and just more comfortable to have a wider shoe like this. If you want to go back and watch, for example, the review I did on the Schmeisser, similar amount of width on this as well, but they're both on the wider side. Now, although everything on this trigger seems very close to mil-spec with how it installs, even the hammer profile looks mil-spec, but actually I put this on my, or I should say I put this lower on my 416A5 upper, and actually ran into some issues. So I'm going to put up that footage and kind of explain it as I go along. You can see bolts open, it's fine here, that round chamber fine. Here, we got a click, and then if I go to try to unload the round, of course, it's jamming up. If I pop this open, you can see, I have to actually take my gloves off for that, but you can see, of course, the hammer is up. It did not disengage that firing pin safety, and of course, what happens a lot on the 416 platform is when it doesn't successfully disengage it, just the whole, just everything jams up, as you saw. So, if you're familiar with the 416 platform, of course, on the top of that bolt carrier group is a firing pin safety, which you need to have a tall enough hammer to disengage it. And your normal mil-spec hammer on an AR will be tall enough, but this one is not. And as you saw, of course, it was actually binding up the charging handle too, which pretty normal, I've found, from a lot of the other incompatible triggers that I've tested on the 416 platform. As for where you can pick one of these triggers up for yourself if you are interested in them, LMT directly will sell them for $250, a little bit expensive. I picked this one up off of House Manufacturing. He had this one just used, technically, just because he put it into one of his lowers, but pretty much perfect condition. So I got a little bit of a better price thanks to that. I'm glad we can actually get these triggers from LMT themselves. I actually knew about these triggers in specific for several months now, thanks to a comment on the Schmeisser trigger review that I did I think over a year ago now. And yeah, at the time, either I missed it or just wasn't available to purchase, but now it is. So highly would recommend this trigger. But yeah, if you are going to use a 416 upper or certain other piston uppers as well, just be aware it will not disengage that firing pin safety. So as for me, while I do really like this trigger, I'm actually going to be switching it into a different lower just because I use this one with my 416s a lot. So I want it to still be compatible, of course. But if you just use ARs, of course, you don't even need to worry about that. It's going to work perfectly for you. No issues with your standard AR bolt carrier groups. Hope that this video was informative. If you have any other additional questions you want to ask, or if you've also tried these triggers and have your own experiences, would love to hear it. If you're also familiar, any of you, with any other triggers that can go on safe with the hammer drop, I kind of like those, so do let me know. I might pick those up and try them out myself. And with that, thank you all for watching this video on the LMT Axle Euro trigger. Take care, and hope to see you all in the next one. See you then.